The driveway was cleaner than I remembered. Not empty, but cleaned. Someone had pressure washed the concrete so hard it left a pale square where my truck used to sit. In the center of it, a dark oval stain still bled through the surface like the shape refused to be erased. Oil, coolant, and something else. My neighbor across the street stood awkwardly beside his mailbox when I stepped out of the rideshare. "Hey, you just got back?" he asked carefully. I nodded. He hesitated, then handed me his phone. It was a video. A flatbed, then a cutting crew. Not a tow, dismantling. My truck lifted halfway, then sparks. Doors removed. Bed separated. A scrap company logo on the side of the trailer. In the background, the HOA president's voice. Abandoned vehicles don't get special treatment just because someone plays soldier. The timestamp was 3 weeks ago. While I was overseas. I didn't say anything. Didn't knock on doors. Didn't call police. Instead, I opened the envelope taped to my garage. Final notice, removal and disposal, $18,420 due. I went inside, pulled up my registration file, and zoomed in on the classification line near the bottom, the part most people never read. Then I sent one email. 9 minutes later, an automated reply arrived. Case accepted for review. Federal interest pending verification. I set the phone down. Because HOAs can tow cars. They just aren't allowed to dispose of that category. So the real question wasn't why they removed it. It was why a vehicle in my driveway belonged to a federal protection class. Around here, nobody raised their voice, they just signed papers they didn't understand. If you like stories where patience beats power, stick around. Because this neighborhood thought they enforced rules. They had no idea they just stepped into someone else's jurisdiction. I bought the house for quiet. Not the kind advertised in brochures, the real kind. One street in, no through traffic, small yards, identical mailboxes, and a homeowners association that mostly cared about lawn height and trash cans facing the correct direction. For someone rotating between deployments, predictable mattered more than impressive. I handled logistics for a support unit. My job wasn't kicking doors, it was making sure the people who did had what they needed when they needed it. Schedules, readiness, equipment accountability. Details were the difference between routine and emergency. The truck in my driveway fit that life. Plain exterior. No decals. No oversized tires. Just a heavy-duty pickup with reinforced suspension and a registration classification that occasionally required paperwork most neighbors would never recognize. Mrs. Halvorsen recognized everything. She introduced herself the week I moved in, HOA president, property manager, and, according to her, the person who kept standards from slipping. She carried a clipboard even when she was just walking her dog. At first it was notes. Trash can visible from sidewalk. Garage light left on overnight. Vehicle parked longer than community comfort guidelines. I corrected what made sense and ignored what didn't. Then the newsletters changed. A new section appeared, non-residential vehicle storage. No names listed, but my driveway was the only one photographed, zoomed, cropped, printed in black and white across 3 pages about protecting property values. 2 days before I left overseas, a neighbor mentioned she'd seen someone taking pictures at sunrise. Another said the board discussed long-term unattended vehicles. So I prepared the same way I did before any absence. Cameras angled to the driveway, document backups uploaded, and a printed contact sheet inside my garage panel. I didn't confront anyone. I locked the door, left for the airport, and figured routine rules would stay routine. 3 weeks later, the HOA held a weekday meeting at noon. Attendance, 5 board members. Agenda item 4, my address. By the time I landed back in the country months later, they'd already voted on something they never told me existed. According to the documents they eventually sent me, the first notice went out 10 days after I deployed. Commercial vehicle, prolonged stationary storage. It was mailed to my house. 4 days later, a second notice, safety hazard determination pending removal authorization. No email. No call to the emergency contact sheet inside my garage panel. Just certified letters sent to an empty mailbox. At the noon meeting, the board voted unanimously that the truck qualified as an abandoned commercial asset. The wording mattered. It allowed enforcement under a different section of the bylaws. Faster timelines. Higher penalties. They posted a violation sticker on the rear window. The cameras recorded a towing company arriving 2 days later. The driver walked the driveway twice, read the registration, then shook his head and left. The timestamp showed a 7-minute phone call from his cab before he drove away. The next morning a different company showed up. Not a tow operator, a scrap contractor. Instead of hooking the frame, they opened the doors. The footage caught the HOA president signing something on a clipboard while the crew began removing parts where it sat. Panels stacked. Bed separated. The truck never left the driveway intact. By the time they hauled the remains away, the violation sticker was still on the glass they carried off. I saw all of it in order for the first time standing in my living room after returning home, bags still unpacked, boots still dusty from travel. I didn't go outside immediately. I watched the last frame freeze on her signature. Then I checked the removal invoice they taped to my garage. It didn't list impound. It listed destruction and disposal. Because the category they used allowed towing, but not dismantling where the vehicle stood. I waited until the next morning to respond. Not because I was unsure, because reactions become evidence, and I wanted mine recorded the same way theirs had been. My first email was simple. Request full violation file, board authorization, contractor agreement, and disposal justification. No accusations. No threats. Just documentation. The reply came 3 hours later from the HOA president. Vehicle classified abandoned commercial property under Section 8.4. Removal executed per community standards. Balance due, $18,420. Attached were scanned copies of notices, a grainy photo of the violation sticker, and a board meeting summary with my address typed in bold. I read every page once. Then again. The wording kept repeating one phrase, removal of nuisance vehicle. Not disposal. I replied with a single question. Please provide the authorization permitting dismantling rather than impound storage. There was no response that day. Instead, a new letter appeared in my email portal that evening, updated balance, $19,095 including late processing fees. The next morning I visited the county clerk's office. The clerk pulled the HOA filing and shrugged. Looks complete. They cited the right covenant section. I asked if the section allowed destruction. She leaned closer to the screen, scrolling slower this time. It allows removal from the property, she said carefully. Storage or tow yard transfer. Not dismantling. She printed the page for me but stamped nothing. Civil disputes weren't her role. My next stop was the local sheriff's substation. The deputy behind the counter listened, then shook his head. If it's HOA enforcement, that's civil. You'd need a court order. I thanked him and left without arguing. Back in my car, I opened the contractor invoice again, the scrap company name at the top, not a tow service. I searched their state license classification. Demolition and salvage processing. Not vehicle impound. I sent one more email. Confirm whether the board authorized a demolition contractor instead of a licensed towing operator. An hour passed. Then another. No answer, but the online account updated again. Balance due, $20,010, lien review pending. Because the company they hired legally couldn't tow vehicles at all. The next move wasn't a reply, it was a letter to every mailbox on the street. I only knew because 3 neighbors texted photos of it before I even opened my own. Community notice, compliance enforcement action. It described an unregistered commercial vehicle left unattended for months, followed by a line about maintaining safety standards and preventing liability exposure for residents. My address wasn't written, but the photo underneath showed my driveway clearly enough that no one needed it. By evening, conversations had already started. One neighbor asked if I'd been running a side business. Another wondered why I hadn't just moved it into storage before leaving. No one sounded hostile, just cautious, like they'd been handed a version of events that explained everything neatly. An hour later, a certified envelope arrived in my email portal. Intent to lien, $20,010 due within 15 days. Additional administrative costs listed in advance. Legal preparation fees. Auction scheduling estimate. They weren't trying to talk to me anymore. They were building a paper trail. I logged into the HOA account and downloaded every statement they'd posted. Each revision added a small amount, postage, documentation handling, legal review, but the language stayed identical, removal of nuisance property. Still not disposal. That night I forwarded the entire file, violations, meeting minutes, contractor invoice, and my deployment orders, to the base legal assistance office listed on my contact sheet. I expected a delayed response. Instead, I got one the next morning. Received. Do not notify the association of our involvement yet. Continue requesting documentation only. No explanation. I followed the instruction. My next email to the HOA was neutral. Please provide contractor license classification and insurance certificate used for the removal. They answered faster this time, a scanned certificate attached, coverage dates visible, signatures highlighted. At the bottom of the policy description, structure demolition and salvage operations. Not vehicle transport. 2 hours later the HOA portal updated again. Balance due, $23,480, lien filing scheduled. The number didn't surprise me. What did was the timing. It was posted 9 minutes after I forwarded the insurance document back to base legal. Because the truck was never legally towable under the rule they used in the first place. The house felt smaller at night. Not physically, just quieter than I expected after months around constant background noise. Overseas, even silence had movement in it. Generators humming, radios clicking, boots passing outside a tent wall. Here, the stillness left space to think. I stared at the driveway through the kitchen window. A clean square of concrete where something solid used to sit. It would have been easier to pay it. End the emails. Stop the neighbors from watching me like I was a problem waiting to spread to their yard. The amount wasn't impossible, just unnecessary. But unnecessary fights have a way of taking more energy than they're worth. I opened the folder again. Deployment orders. Registration classification. Readiness acknowledgement page I'd signed without thinking about it at the time. During service, equipment accountability never depended on convenience. If something assigned went missing, the answer wasn't whether recovery was comfortable, it was whether recovery was required. This wasn't about the truck anymore. It was about a decision made while I legally couldn't respond, followed by paperwork written as if absence meant permission. I closed the laptop and considered the alternative: pay the balance, clear the lien threat, and go back to normal life. But normal depended on precedent. And precedent depended on record. My phone vibrated, a reply from Base Legal. Confirm, vehicle listed on activation readiness roster at time of removal? I opened the scanned copy and found the line I'd skipped before. Standby mobilization asset, continuous accountability status. I typed one word back. Yes. Because that single designation connected the driveway to a chain of command far outside the neighborhood. The first crack in their story didn't come from the truck. It came from the minutes. I requested a certified copy of the HOA meeting record, not the PDF they emailed, but the archived version filed with the property management software vendor. State law required timestamp retention for board votes. They sent it. The vote authorizing removal was logged at 12:14 p.m. But the contractor invoice, the one approving destruction and disposal, was signed at 9:02 a.m. that same morning. 3 hours earlier. Meaning the disposal decision existed before the board officially voted to remove anything. I requested clarification. Please confirm whether disposal authorization preceded board vote. No response. Instead, the portal showed a revised set of minutes uploaded later that afternoon. The timestamps were gone. The wording had changed from removal discussion to removal and abatement action. Too clean. I checked my camera footage again. The first towing company had arrived the day before the vote, read the registration, made a phone call, and left. The scrap contractor came the morning of the vote. Before noon. Before authorization. I forwarded the original archived minutes and invoice timestamps to Base Legal. The reply came within minutes this time. Preserve everything. Do not confront them. Proceed to request contractor liability waiver. I sent the request. 36 minutes later, a scanned waiver arrived, signed personally by the HOA president, accepting responsibility for disposal decisions. She hadn't waited for the board. She'd signed it herself. But the timeline mistake still wasn't the reason federal review had been triggered. The next email didn't come from the HOA. It came from Base Legal. Not advice, instruction. Do not contact the association further. A notice will be delivered. Continue documenting all communication. No explanation attached. No opinion about the fees, the lien, or even the destruction itself. Just process. 2 hours later my HOA portal updated again. Final PRE lien demand, $24,960. Below it sat a scheduled filing date and a warning that legal action would begin if payment wasn't received. The tone had changed, less administrative, more confident. Like they believed the growing number itself would force resolution. I didn't respond. Instead, I opened the registration file for the truck again and read it the same way I'd been trained to read manifests overseas, not for the bold text, but for the classification codes underneath. Most vehicles list owner, plate, and insurance status. Mine listed something extra. Use category, standby mobilization asset. Status, continuous accountability, active orders period. I'd signed that acknowledgement before deployment along with other readiness paperwork. At the time it meant the vehicle could be requisitioned during emergency activation if needed. Nothing dramatic, just logistics redundancy. But the line beneath it mattered more. Disposition restrictions, civilian transfer or disposal prohibited during activation window without federal release authorization. I forwarded that page months ago without understanding why legal asked for it. Now I did. That afternoon a neighbor texted me a photo of an envelope taped to the HOA clubhouse door. Plain, white, official seal in the corner. No return address they recognized. By evening every board member had received one. The next morning my inbox contained a copy. Notice of federal interest. This correspondence acknowledges receipt of documentation regarding the destruction of a registered standby mobilization asset during an active deployment period. The property identified was under continuous accountability designation at time of removal. Any civilian action resulting in permanent disposal constitutes potential interference with federally protected readiness material pending review under applicable statutes. All collection actions related to the associated lien are to cease until jurisdictional determination is completed. The HOA portal changed within minutes. The balance still displayed, but the payment button was gone. I watched the board email thread, previously fast, go silent for the first time since I returned home. 30 minutes later, a new message appeared addressed to me directly. Please clarify the nature of your vehicle's registration classification so we can resolve this misunderstanding. I didn't reply. Because the notice already had. They had treated the truck like unattended personal property. The paperwork treated it like equipment assigned accountability during orders. The difference wasn't value. It was jurisdiction. That evening another document appeared in my inbox, forwarded from Base Legal. A formal inquiry had been sent to the county regarding unauthorized disposal of protected property during an active service period and the filing of financial penalties against the service member while deployed. The lien date in the HOA portal vanished. Then the violation history disappeared. Then the entire account showed status pending review. For weeks they'd controlled the timeline, notices, deadlines, escalating balances. Now every action froze at once. The board scheduled an emergency meeting for residents the following Saturday. No agenda attached. No community newsletter explanation. Just attendance requested. Because the next step wouldn't happen in emails anymore, it would happen in front of everyone. The meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m. at the clubhouse, the same room where they'd voted about my driveway while I was overseas. This time every chair was filled. Not because people cared about bylaws, but because uncertainty travels faster than newsletters. The notice of federal interest had spread through the neighborhood in less than a day. No one knew what it meant, only that the HOA suddenly stopped posting violations. The board sat at the front table. For the first time since I moved in, the president didn't bring her clipboard. Next to her sat a man I hadn't seen before, county legal counsel. A few seats behind him, another man in a plain uniform with base insignia on the shoulder. He didn't introduce himself. He didn't need to. The president opened the meeting quickly. This is a clarification session regarding a removal action taken under community authority. She avoided my name. She explained abandoned vehicle policy, safety concerns, insurance liability, the same phrases from the letters. Her voice stayed controlled, but she read faster than usual. Then the county attorney spoke. Before discussion continues, he said calmly, the association should understand the purpose of today's meeting is informational. Determinations regarding jurisdiction are not made by vote. Murmurs spread through the room. She nodded and continued anyway, pointing at printed photos of my truck in the driveway. Extended absence created a hazard condition. The board acted to protect property values. The base legal officer stood only when she finished. He didn't walk to the front, just remained beside his chair. Was the vehicle dismantled on-site under association authorization? He asked. She hesitated. Yes. Under nuisance abatement. He looked to the county attorney, who opened a folder. The covenant section cited authorizes removal to storage, the attorney said, not destruction. Additionally, the contractor classification provided to this office does not permit vehicle impound services. The president straightened. We relied on professional judgment. The officer's tone didn't change. Did the association verify registration classification before disposal? She answered carefully. It was registered to a homeowner address. He paused, not for effect, but as if confirming the order of statements. Residents leaned forward. I hadn't spoken yet. Didn't plan to unless asked. Finally, the county attorney gestured toward me. Would you like to clarify the registration category for the record? I stood. No speech prepared. No anger left to spend. Just the same explanation I'd repeated in emails. The vehicle was listed under continuous accountability during active orders. Blank expressions around the room. The officer completed it. That designation restricts civilian disposal during the activation period. Jurisdiction transfers outside association authority. Silence followed, not dramatic, just complete. The president tried once more. We enforce community standards. We had no way to know. I answered before she finished, calm enough that no one raised their voice afterward. You didn't remove a vehicle, you disposed of an activated asset under federal protection. No one interrupted. The officer handed a document to the county attorney, who read only the final paragraph aloud. All collection actions and penalties are suspended pending determination of unlawful conversion of protected property. A resident near the back asked quietly, "What does that mean for the HOA?" The attorney closed the folder. It means authority depends on jurisdiction. The meeting adjourned without a vote. No arguments followed. People simply stood and left slower than they arrived, as if unsure what rules still applied in the room. The board remained seated. No one looked at me. Because the consequences wouldn't be decided by the neighborhood anymore, they'd be calculated afterward. The first official outcome didn't arrive as a verdict. It arrived as a freeze. 3 days after the meeting, the county recorded a notice suspending the HOA's lien authority on my property pending review. The balance that had climbed past $24,000 was formally invalidated. Not reduced. Invalidated. Then came the second notice, directed to the association, not me. The disposal of property designated under continuous accountability during active service triggered review under federal service member protections. Civil interference, improper lien filing during deployment, and potential wrongful conversion were listed as areas under examination. The wording was neutral. The implications weren't. The HOA's insurance carrier requested documentation within 48 hours. When they reviewed the contractor waiver signed personally by the president, authorizing demolition prior to board vote, they issued a reservation of rights letter. In plain terms, intentional acts are not covered. Without coverage, legal defense shifted from association funds to individual liability exposure. The board held another closed session. 2 members resigned that week. The property management company that shared office space with the president received a compliance inquiry from the county regarding contractor selection and record alteration. Meanwhile, Base Legal finalized their determination. Because the truck was registered as a standby mobilization asset during active orders, civilian disposal without federal release authorization constituted unauthorized conversion of protected property. The remedy wasn't theatrical. It was financial. The HOA was ordered to compensate the full replacement value of the vehicle under federal interest review, not scrap value, not depreciated community estimate, replacement cost tied to its mobilization classification. In addition, all fines voided. Lien permanently dismissed. Administrative penalties assessed for improper filing during active deployment. Contractor cleared of liability due to written objection on record. Formal compliance directive issued to the HOA regarding enforcement limits. There was no criminal charge announced in the room. Just documentation. But documentation carries weight. Within 30 days, the HOA president stepped down for personal reasons. The board announced a special election. The management contract with her affiliated company quietly expired without renewal. A cashier's check arrived at my door the following week, certified, itemized, signed by the association treasurer. No apology letter attached. It didn't need one. The final notice from the county was simple. Matter resolved. Federal interest satisfied. The driveway still showed a faint outline where the truck once sat. But the record no longer did. Justice wasn't loud. It was ledgered. And in the end, the numbers that escalated to pressure me were the same numbers that calculated their consequence. The replacement truck arrived early on a quiet weekday morning. No announcement, just a delivery driver confirming a signature and handing over the keys. Same model class, same configuration, but newer. The kind of detail only someone tracking paperwork would notice. By afternoon, a few neighbors walked past slower than usual. One stopped at the edge of the driveway and nodded. Another apologized for believing the newsletter version of events. No one mentioned the meeting directly. The HOA mailbox looked different the following week, new names printed under the board list. Shorter rules posted online. Fewer warnings taped to doors. I remounted the small flag holder beside the garage and put the camera back to its normal angle, not focused on the street anymore. Life returned to routines, trash day, lawn care, quiet evenings. Nothing dramatic changed. That was the point. Authority works best when it's invisible, and so does accountability. I locked the truck, stepped inside, and turned off the porch light. Some power depends on volume. Real power depends on jurisdiction.